Hey everybody, we are back in Gettysburg. So today I'm gonna finish up what I started a little while ago, which is the telling of the first day's battles. Again, I am not a battlefield guide, not trying to be a battlefield guide. I'm just sharing my passion. I'm very interested in the Civil War. I'm learning more as I go, and I hope to get other folks interested in Gettysburg as I am, and to learn as they go. So right here we can start. That's going to be kind of hard to read. This is a plaque to signify or to commemorate O'Neill's brigade, and I'll read a little bit of it. July 1st, soon after arriving at this position, 3 regiments attacked the Union flank, blah blah blah, ordered to guard, blah blah blah, Dole's brigade, blah blah blah, Valley of the Left, and blah blah blah. Joining Daniels's brigade, and afterwards Ramser's brigade, the 3 regiments were repulsed with heavy loss, but the entire brigade took part in the general attack soon made by the Confederates, which finally dislodged the Union forces from Seminary Ridge. So again, the blah 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 wasn't that important, but I want to cover the general stuff, you know, for people who are as new to this as I am or newer. So to pick up really quickly, the first part of the battle that I covered was McPherson's Farm, and we're about to get a peek of it way off in the distance. But that was the earlier part of the fighting. That was with John Buford, you know, kind of leading the charge, or being the first one there, being met eventually by John Reynolds. And as some folks know, Buford did well, but he was pushed back eventually. Reynolds was killed in action. They were squaring off mainly against J.J. Archer's brigade for the Confederates. Archer was eventually captured, and there's a funny line behind that, but I'll try to come back to that. As well as Davis, which was I think it's Joseph R. Davis, and he was actually the nephew. Sorry, I'm trying to speak up and get closer to the camera when I need to with all the traffic going by and stuff, and there's a little bit of wind. But he was the nephew of the Confederate President Jefferson Davis. So you had Davis. It was basically Davis and Archer against basically Reynolds and Buford to begin with. Eventually, like I said, Reynolds was killed in the Herbst Woods, and he was replaced temporarily by Abner Doubleday. So that's kind of where we left off. Now, as I mentioned in the other videos, there was a lull in the fighting, and don't hold my feet to the fire on this. The lull, I think, kind of began a little bit before noon, maybe 11:30 or so, and the fighting picked up approximately, don't hold me to this, the fighting picked up approximately, I think, maybe just after 1 o'clock in the afternoon or so. Now, if you notice, maybe you didn't notice, but this rock wall just started to begin from where I was walking. Oh, by the way, up there, way in the distance, you can see the Eternal Peace Light Memorial, and as you can see, it is slammed with tourists. There are about 5 tour buses there, so we're not going there, maybe later. But so there is a midday lull in the fighting on day 1, which is basically between the areas of Seminary Ridge and McPherson's Ridge. So basically, we had a couple generals who stayed out and were still doing okay and holding their own. One was Lysander Cutler. He was still out here on, well, basically at first up on the on the east side of Seminary Ridge and the railroad cut. He is soon supported by General Henry Baxter. And so they are kind of, let me see if I can point this out here. So way off in the distance, as you can maybe see, the furthermost point in the distance is the South Mountain Range. And now at this point I'm looking dead ahead, and I can't zoom in this mode, but dead ahead, way off in the distance, is the McPherson Farm. So that's kind of where we started off. The action gets pushed back slightly eastward, however, and that's where we find ourselves from leaving the Chambersburg Pike back to where we are now. This road I'm coming up on now with a Jeep going by. We are now on the Mummersburg Road, which is just west of the Emmetsburg Pike. So out here we still have Cutler. Cutler's been holding his own. He is supported by Henry Baxter. And on the other side we have a couple. We have, starting off, we more or less have General O'Neill, we have Alfred Iverson, and we have Junius Daniel. And almost all the troops, about 85% perhaps, of the Confederate troops just happen to be North Carolinians. There are maybe 2 Alabama regiments mixed in there somewhere. So, let me see. Rhodes orders that first O'Neill to, well, it was actually supposed to, okay, so O'Neill and Iverson and Daniel, no, O'Neill and Iverson were supposed to advance together. But unfortunately for the Confederates, due to a lot of confusion, poor communication, and just generally kind of shoddy leadership at the time, O'Neill leaves early. O'Neill starts getting ready and starts leaving to lead the charge before the other regiments are ready. So that presents a big problem. As the experts say, the attack was disjointed from the start. So O'Neill comes in early, and he gets the you-know-what kicked out of him. O'Neill hangs in there for about 15 minutes because he left early and didn't have support right behind him or right next to him. So O'Neill is temporarily out of the picture, but only temporarily. Next we have Iverson's brigade, Alfred Iverson. And this is one of the most famous parts of the Oak Ridge battle. Alfred Iverson, unfortunately for him, but fortunately for the Union, did not send out early skirmishers. In other words, he did not kind of sweep the area in front of him before he brought all his troops, and that resulted in massive losses in a very short period of time. I'm kind of upset that this first day's battle doesn't get more attention than it should, because it was a very bloody affair. There were a lot of significant battles, and truthfully, I think the first day's battles, for the most part, aren't that popular, just because A, they're the first day's battles, and B, the Union eventually had to fall back and retreat. But Iverson, there were some temporary successes for the Union, such as when an Iverson advanced without having skirmishers out front, got the you-know-what kicked out of him, and you know, figures vary, but within about 10 minutes or so, Iverson suffered 800 to 900 casualties in about 10 minutes. I mean, that's almost 100 a minute. It was really extraordinary. And so somewhere in front of us are what they call the Iverson Pit. By the way, the Iverson Pit is the first official ghost story of Gettysburg. According to Tim Smith of the Adams County Historical Society, there were no ghost stories really to speak of, or that were in common circulation, until I'm gonna step over these because these aren't original. There were no ghost stories until the Iverson Pit became famous, and the story was born of the fact that some farmers said that whenever they plowed the field, they heard screams. So it's kind of hard to make out for you guys. Raise the camera a little bit, but there is a as usual, soft rolling hills that lead up to this ridge. Now, this ridge was not a terrifically formidable position. It was a formidable position, but not an impregnable one. As the slope is softer, it's not as steep. So that's why eventually the Union did get pulled back, did get pushed back. But following up, so we had Baxter. Baxter is eventually kind of called off, I think, to help, I forget who he was called off to help, but he was called off, I think, to go back towards, to support over at Seminary Ridge. Yeah, I'm pretty sure about that, but I forget exactly who he supported. But so in place of Baxter, we have Gabriel Paul move in. And this is getting towards the latter part of the fighting. I gotta wrap this up. Gabriel Paul moves in a couple hours later in the afternoon, and everybody holds their own. The Union finally lines up. In other words, at first the formations were kind of like in V shapes. You kind of had Cutler like this and Baxter like this, and eventually they kind of lined up. Same thing goes for the Confederates. As disjointed as their attack initially was, they finally got it together. So they eventually keep getting more troops. The two generals that started it, Iverson and O'Neill, are eventually supplanted by a General Davis, and behind Davis eventually we get oh shoot, what's his name, Stephen Ramsey. I think I'm pronouncing his last name right. So it's like the books say, the Union did very, very well here, but eventually the Confederates kept coming, and the Union just couldn't hold out forever. So sometime in the mid-afternoon, to wrap this up, we had a Colonel Charles Tilden. Colonel Charles Tilden is with a very famous Maine regiment, but not the 20th. He was with the 16th Maine, and he and his boys were called upon to be the last in line and to basically cover the retreat. And he was told, I forget what the line was, but to hold his position at all costs. And when he was given that order, he and his men knew exactly what it meant. It meant almost certain death or capture. And it's one of those really, really heroic moments that just give me the chills. Again, it's easy for us to judge these people, and it's easy to think, oh yeah, maybe I would have been that brave in that situation, but it's really hard to say. So the 16th Maine and Charles Tilden were the last ones here. And I'm out of time, guys, but hopefully I'm going to pick this back up in a few. We'll see.